is Taufik, and thanks for joining my recording. It's really nice to have you here. So the recording today is was actually will I say record? The tweet today is about a tweet I actually came about on Twitter. That was asking, do you hash your or encrypt your password? Basically, from my basic understanding of what hash and encrypt is, hashing is just a way of you turning a message into a secret code, and you have this magical machine that has this ability to actually decrypt it, and that has the ability to hash it, and it has the ability to also decrypt it as well. So this message usually looks completely different the um, from the message you passed to actually hash. Why encrypting, on the other hand, is more like putting a message in a box, locking it up using a secret code, and making sure that only anyone with the ability to the only people that you want, or only set of individuals or ways that you want to actually decrypt it, will only have the code. Imagine locking your box that you are traveling with 955. You've locked it, and you scramble it, you scramble the lock so that anybody cannot just come. And the only people that can open it are the people that you actually tell that your box code is 955. Basically, that's what encrypting and decrypting is. You encrypt when you actually have the intention of actually decrypting the value. Then why for hashing, you usually hash when you don't have the intention of actually like trying to find the result of the hash, or more like trying to find the actual um, value that was hashed. So a very good example now, if you look at hashing is majorly used in authentication, in passwords, in authentication systems, when you try to hash the password provided by your user, so that if anybody gains access to your code, they won't easily know, they would soon be easy for them to actually decrypt it. So basically, I want to do a deep dive into Laravel documentation to explain how Laravel does its hashing, and also how it actually makes use of the inbuilt PHP functions to actually perform the hashing and the likes. So the first thing I will just go to is the documentation itself. Uh, at Laravel provide a facade that provides the ability to hash password using the bcrypt algorithm and using the argon algorithm. So these algorithms are used to actually hash your password. So it now depends on the developer or you to actually determine the algorithm you actually want to make use of to decrypt to hash your password. So if you go to the Laravel hashing.php, you will notice that if we go to the hashing config file, you will notice there is a driver set there, bcrypt, which is like the default set for Laravel for hashing of password. There are three algorithms that are supported: the bcrypt, the argon, and the argon 2ID. And also, Laravel gives you the ability to state the number of round that you want your password to be hashed. So this around the recommended number is 10. The higher you go, the more energy it is going to use with your the more energy it is going to use in your system. Argon also adds its own configuration. We have the memory, we have the thread, we have the time. So all of these values you can change. Just know that if you increase any of these values, it also increases the power consumption, that is memory consumption and the likes on your machine. So imagine you increasing this to 100. That means it will actually take longer time for your password to get hashed. So, but at 10 it's still very, very sensible. So how did I go into the deep dive? So the first thing is, this is one of the projects, some projects that I've worked on a very long time ago. Uh, So you can see am making use of the hash, and it takes in the value and options. These options are what is provided, normal options that is acceptable by password hash in PHP itself. The password hash, the options that are available that is expected of you that you can send is the salt, the cost, the memory, the time cost, the threads. So the memory cost, the time cost, the thread are majorly used by Argon 2i and Argon 2ID, which are the two, this second and the third algorithm supported by Laravel. So you have to provide, there's a default, of course, there is default for each of these. So, but if you want to like modify them, you can provide memory cost, you can provide time cost, and you can provide threads. So, but note that before you can use Argon, that means you must have this library included in your development machine or your production machine or your Docker. So let's go back to Laravel. So if you go to Laravel, for example, the one major where it all started is this manager. This manager guy is a class that I think was created by the Laravel framework itself. It is inside the Illuminate support folder. So it's I so this is like the basic of it. So it has some set of methods that allows it to perform the function. But the one major method that I want us uh, to be aware of this call method, which is a magic method by PHP that allows you to actually call method within a class, uh, and it calls the method if it exists. If it does not exist, and that is it. So for patch also for the manager, for the hash manager, it extends the manager, which in turn then implements the hasher. So if we look at the hasher, we see we have the info method, we have the make method, we have the check method, we have the needs rehash method. The two methods that are usually used the most by Laravel developers are the make method and the check method, which the make method is basically what we use for hashing our password, and the check method is what we use for comparing our password, comparing the password provided by the user. Let's say, for example, you want to log in, you provide the check password, you want to hash a password, you make use of the check method, to see if the provided password and the hash password in the database are equal, or the provide the, has not been altered basically. The why the make method is what we use to generate the hashes. So the hash manager extends the manager, which in turn now creates instance for each of the supported drivers, creates an instance for bcrypt, creates an instance for Argon, then creates an instance for Argon 2ID as well. So these instances are created using the default options that has been provided by Laravel itself. As you can see, for bcrypt, it makes use of this option is automatically loaded in. For Argon, these options are automatically loaded in. So that is what is happening in the each of these method. So now I said the hash manager extended the manager. So if you look at the manager class, you will notice that we have there is a method called get default driver. This get default driver is implemented by any class that extends the manager. So what this default method will now do will be dependent on, so this get default method is what states how the class that extends this manager gets the default driver for that particular set, for the particular set of available driver. For example, if you look at Laravel, um, Laravel also supports a lot of driver for sending mails. This manager or the mail manager also extend this manager to get the default. So once the hash manager implemented or extended the manager, it had to provide a method for getting the default driver. So for a way to get the default driver for Laravel or for your application, for example, now is it goes into the config folder, checks into the hashing, then the driver that has been provided by you, basically. So that is how it gets the default driver. So once the default driver is returned, the hash manager then the manager then in turn goes ahead to set the driver that is being used by the class that actually extends it. And if that driver is null, it throws this error stating that it does not is unable to resolve the null driver. And if it is set, the driver is actually called. Driver is called. So as you can see, the driver is actually called by creating a driver for, if the driver is not set, I mean, maybe it's the first time that you are instantiating the class, the driver is not set, the driver is actually created. You notice that in our hash manager, we have this method of create bcreate driver. If you look at the hash, the manager also, you will notice that method is being created, create, then the driver that you are trying to make use of, bcrypt for example, then the driver. So this way it generates the method name that you are trying to use to create the driver. So if the method exists, it returns it, and if the method does not exist, it tells you invalid argument or exception, telling you that the driver is not supported by Laravel. So it's also another thing that you need to notice is that it checks if there is custom drivers. If there are custom driver, it calls the custom driver. But I don't want to go into that. I'm just trying to explain how the hash manager actually works. So if your bcrypt is set as the default hashing mechanism, it calls the bcrypt on the create bcrypt driver, then it creates an instance of the bcrypt hasher using the configuration that you've actually set in your for bcrypt in your config folder. So once that is done, then it is also able to now call on the driver, on the bcrypt driver, call the info method on the. So once you've actually set your driver, I mean your hash manager is able to call the info method on it, is able to call the make method on it, is able to call the check method on it, and is able to call needs rehash method on it. Now, if you look at now, let's go to the abstract hasher, which now has some information that, like, because the reason why this class was created is basically because it is able to be independent from other classes. Like, it can work. All you need to pass it is the hashed value to get a password get info. So this password get info and password verify are both password provided by PHP function in general. It's provided by PHP function in general. You can easily find it on the PHP documentation. So this returns the info of the hash value. It can return info such as the type of hashing mechanism that is used, the and so on and so forth. I don't want to go into that. Then this password verify basically checks against the hash value, the value that you are passing and the hash value, to see if they are actually equal. So basically that is that. So each of our driver that is implemented by Laravel then in turns extends this abstract hasher and also implements the hasher contract. As I explained before, the hasher contract is just an interface that provides all the method that must be implemented by a class that intends to be an hasher. So this means you can actually create your own custom bcrypt hasher. So basically that is what it means. So if you are going to create your own custom bcrypt hasher, that means it will extend the abstract hasher and it will also implement the hasher contract. So for make, we have the password hash. So the password hash, which is the make method, which is like the main thing that we majorly use of when you want to register a new user in Laravel. The password hash is a PHP function that has the ability to accept the string you are trying to hash, the type of algorithm you want to hash your password with, and the options as I have explained before. The algorithm available is we have the password default, which is like the bcrypt. Then you can also state that you want to use password bcrypt using the crypto using the crypt blowfish algorithm. You can make use of the argon 2I. You can make use of the argon 2I d as well. So once it hashes the password using the set of configuration you have provided, it then in turns, then if the hash is false, that is maybe an error actually occurred or the hash could not be completed, it throws an error to let you know that it has that was going terribly. Then if this does not happen, it returns the hash, which it is this hash that it returns that we then in turn save into our database. So then we have the check. With the check basically uh, does calls, as you can see, parent, it calls the super class, which is the abstract hasher. Where is it? The abstract hasher, which actually helps you just basically, as I said, it is can be reused across the all the drivers, which helps you check if the password that has been supplied actually has not been altered and has not been altered. So if it has been altered, it will return false, of course, and if it has not been altered, it will return true, or if the password provided is not correct. So one of those is definitely going to happen. So this is how Laravel basically does is um, creation creation of hash values for your password and verification of the hash values for your password. So I hope I have been able to explain how Laravel hashing and verification of hashed password actually works. So each of the drivers have their own implementation. As you can see, this is still making use of the parent check, but it has its own implementation of needs to rehash and make. That is what is different. So this actually teaches us a lot of things about how Laravel internals actually work. And as you can see, these methods I love them. They are usually very self-explanatory. You just need to find a way to dig around it and understand how they work. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope I've been able to explain to you how Laravel Hash works and the like. Then another thing I forgot to ask is some of to another thing that I forgot to actually add is that for check for when you are hashing your password, PHP function this hash password hash provides a default sort value. It provides a default sort value. So which means unlike the olden days that we usually set, and once because it provides a sort value, that means for every password you hash in the application, it helps you to to make you set a salt value that for every hash. So that means even if it won't be easy for or anyone to easily just decrypt your password because due to the variation of salt value. So that saves you from trying to think of how to actually know the salt value that you want to use for every user. In the olden days, we will have to save the salt value in a section of the database. Then we'll now using the source value that we used during the generation to now hash the password. And also when you want to decrypt it, you need to get the source value to do so that is no longer needed. So that's it. And for I need to also state that for from PHP 8.0 and above, you no longer need to provide the sort value. As I said, the sort option is deprecated and is now preferred to simply use the sort that is generated by default. So the sort is generated by default by by PHP, as I stated earlier. This is the last. Thank you for actually joining, and I hope you actually enjoyed it. Thank you.